With just 2 days to go before Anzac Day, the diggers of the Merriweather RSL Club have received a very special present. The Soldiers' Monument at the junction was one of the casualties of the Newcastle earthquake. The 70-year-old statue could not be repaired, so Newcastle Council commissioned an exact replica imported from Italy. Today, the 1.8-metre marble soldier was winched into place, sitting across from the Junction Tavern, looking towards the rising sun.
He's the only soldier that has ever stood with his back to a pub on Anzac Day.
The statue was especially rushed through customs, ready to stand guard over the fallen for Anzac Day 1991. Peter Ryan, NBN News.
Mr Morris was a guest speaker at a meeting of Northern New South Wales Road Transport Association members looking for improvements to efficiency and safety in the trucking industry. The roads inquiry outlined by Mr Morris will be conducted by Parliament's Land Transport Infrastructure Committee and will cover every aspect of the nation's roadways, from usage and durability to construction techniques.
What we'll be looking at from the House of Representatives Parliamentary Committee is the value we get for our road dollar.
Likely to be in the committee's sights will be the familiar council road gangs, which Mr Morris suspects could be more efficient. Local government is likely to be outraged by suggestions that federal road grants are being misspent, but Mr Morris is ready for a hostile reception.
Well, this will be a wonderful opportunity for councils to show the rest of Australia how well and how efficient they are in building and maintaining their roads, as well as obviously putting a case for more money for roads.
First submissions to the inquiry will be called in a few weeks, but the final results aren't expected to be reported to Parliament until the middle of next year. In the meantime, Transport Association representatives are predicting a doubling of heavy vehicles on the nation's highways over the next decade, and motorists can expect a large proportion of that transport to be in the form of 23-metre B-double semi-trailers.
There could be 3,000 to 4,000 introduced over the next 4 or 5 years. They'll be mostly on interstate work, where there's currently around 15,000 trucks.
RTA delegates were invited to inspect one of the transports. Lord Mayor John McNaughton accepted a ride. Despite its massive bulk, the RTA says the vehicle is highly manoeuvrable and drivers will undergo extensive training before getting behind the wheel. B-doubles are restricted to approved transport routes, and despite his ride, the Lord Mayor said his council had no plans to increase their access to inner city and suburban roads.
Commissioner Brian Burdigan told the lunch that it is a mistake to believe that just getting the economy right is enough. He said the benchmark of a civilisation is how it treats the most vulnerable in the community.
In the Homeless Children's Inquiry and thus far in the National Inquiry on Mental Illness, we have found evidence that suggests we will pay a very high price economically as well as in terms of human rights for ignoring the basic rights of our young people, indeed our community at large.
The price of neglecting our responsibilities in those areas is, according to Commissioner Burdigan, greater cost overall in the long term.
If you take young people who've developed a mental illness and instead of responding with appropriate treatment, you lock them up in a detention facility, then quite frankly you shouldn't be surprised if they respond in a way that we'd regard as antisocial, perhaps get involved with the juvenile justice system, and yet we're doing that in one of our largest states. We have to do better than that, and I'm sure that we can.
In Newsnight on NBN tonight at 10:35, we'll talk to Human Rights Commissioner Brian Burdigan at greater length about his important work in the fields of homeless youth and the mentally ill.
Brett, Tony and Todd use the road like any car or bike owner to get from point A to point B.
I use my skateboard for transportation, like it gets me around places. We had to skate on the road to get down here.
But from May 3rd, skaters will be grounded on roads that have a centre line, lane line or median strip and will face a $32 fine. The government cites 2 skateboard deaths and 41 serious accidents in the state in the last 7 years as the reason for the change. Riders are encouraged to stick to specially designated areas, but while there are more than 8 ramps and bowls in the Hunter, the skaters say it's not enough.
Some people don't have any facilities at all.
Health authorities have also called for skaters to wear helmets. While it's not compulsory by law, the experts say it's certainly a good idea for their health.
If you've got difficult economic times, that increases pressure on families. It increases the risk that young people could become homeless because it increases pressure on members of that family, whether through unemployment of the breadwinner or breadwinners, whether through unemployment of the young people. The tension in the family increases, and that predisposes more young people to a risk of homelessness. So certainly the recession has a negative effect. We certainly have to get better at running our economy, but we shouldn't think that necessarily addressing the economic indicators will make our society more just and will give us a better quality of life. That's why I say we need to be a more compassionate country as well as a more clever country.
Is the current recession making things worse for the sort of people you're talking about?
That's true. Adjusting our economy, and I'm not an economist, but obviously is extremely important so that families who are under enormous pressure at the minute because of unemployment, families that are under increased stress, have an opportunity for their young people to get jobs. All the evidence I've seen in the last 4.5 years shows very clearly that our young people have to have a sense of their own worth, their own dignity, and unless you can offer them training and employment, it's very hard for them to have a sense of their own worth. It's very hard for a lot of our young people who can't find jobs at the minute to feel that they do have an important role or any role in our society. And that's very demoralising. I mean, a lot of the homeless children we saw in that inquiry were children who lacked any sense of their own worth or dignity because they hadn't been able to find employment, because they didn't feel they fitted into our community, and because they felt that we didn't value them. So being able to offer our young people jobs, being able to offer them a role in our society where they feel they're contributing productively, in my view, is enormously important.
You say you were listening to evidence and you are a trained lawyer. Were you conducting the inquiries as a lawyer or as a compassionate person?
Oh, I would hope both. It's difficult when you're hearing evidence on a subject like mental illness because there are many, many factors involved. But the reality is that the evidence we've already heard in Victoria shows very clearly that there are some quite serious, in fact outrageous violations of the rights of people with mental illness taking place in certain parts of this country, in particular in that state. Now, if we continue, as we have in the past, to inappropriately respond to young people with mental illness by throwing them into detention facilities or jails when we should be offering them effective treatment, as we would for somebody who's physically ill, then we will continue to see young people who respond in quite antisocial ways perhaps, and we as a community will have to bear the responsibility for that.
Should we be spending more on facilities for helping the mentally ill?
Certainly. On the evidence so far, it is clear that we discriminate as a country against people with mental illness in the sense that we do not allocate anything like the resources to mental illness that we allocate to physical illness.
Would that be because they're the sort of people who are powerless as far as political push are concerned?
I think in large part it is because people with mental illness are a quite powerless group in our community. It's going to affect more and more of us as our community gets older, and dementia is a factor in the lives of many people. But I think what we have to understand, and you, the media, have a critical role in this, is that mental illness affects at least 1.7 million Australians, possibly as many as 3 million Australians. So we shouldn't treat it as a taboo subject. It affects almost every family, directly or indirectly. And when we understand that, I believe we'll get rid of a lot of the stigma and discrimination and ignorance which leads to people with mental illness being treated as third-rate human beings.
Mr. Burdigan, thanks for talking to us on Newsnight.
Thank you very much.
For many, Stockton Street is the most familiar gateway to the popular holiday destination. It, along with busy Magnus Street in the heart of town, could be turned into a pedestrian mall. The council's mall plan sets out entertainment and open-air eating areas designed to enhance the shopping centre. But there's already division among business people.
The greater percentage don't want it. Yeah, I'm all thumbs up. I reckon that's a go.
A main concern addressed by council in the plan is that of traffic flow and parking.
The council sees that it's absolutely integral that there has to be some more car parking in the area, and there has to be a bypass constructed in the Dowling Street area to take the through traffic away from the commercial area.
An outline of the mall proposal will go on public display from next month. Andrew Lobb reporting from Nelson Bay for NBN News.
Be set free from the fear of man. Help them in every situation to know and do the things.
Taree had one of its biggest Anzac Day marches in many years. A Salvation Army band led the parade through Victoria Street, with Mayor Metcalfe keeping step with RSL officials. They were supported by an RAAF contingent from Williamtown, led by squadron leader Mark Hope. There was a strong turnout of World War II veterans and a large number of Vietnam returned personnel. Marchers too young for any call-up joined the ranks. Crowds gathered at Fotheringham Park on the banks of the Manning River for a remembrance service.
Relatives and friends of the dead woman gathered in stunned silence at the house early this morning. News of the stabbing came as a shock to the entire suburb, where few had any idea of the drama until they heard news reports this morning. Neighbours first knew of the killing when a resident ran out of the house at about 3 a.m. calling for an ambulance. Police found the woman's body slumped in a bedroom.
She suffered what appeared to be numerous stab wounds to the face and chest area.
Are you looking for someone in connection with this?
Yes, we're urgently seeking the assistance of a 26-year-old male person from that address who we believe can help us with the inquiries.
It's understood the man was a resident of the house and a close acquaintance of the dead woman, 24-year-old mother of four, Lana Marie Walsh. Her body was taken to Glebe Police Morgue for a post-mortem to be carried out tomorrow. Police recovered a 20-centimetre hunting knife from the backyard of the home. They believe the man they wish to question may have headed to Purfleet near Taree, where he has relatives. He's described as 175 centimetres tall, of thin build with black hair. He has a dark complexion and numerous tattoos on both arms. The inquiry has further stretched the resources of Belmont Police, who are still working on the unconnected murder of 29-year-old Englishman Dominic Manson, whose body was fished out of Lake Macquarie last month. Warrants have been issued for the arrest of a man and a woman in connection with his death, but so far the pair have avoided capture.
Rescue services were called to the smash 20 kilometres south of Gloucester at around 3:30. It's believed the driver of this car veered onto the wrong side of the road, slamming into an oncoming vehicle. While the Buckets Way is a renowned accident black spot, police say conditions on this stretch are good.
This stretch of roadway here is probably the best on the Buckets Way. It's not considered a bad stretch at all.
An elderly man was killed in the impact. The driver of the other car trapped inside his vehicle for 40 minutes until cut free by emergency workers using the jaws of life. Ambulances took 3 people to Gloucester Hospital. Peter Ryan, NBN News.
Two years ago, Newcastle Council unanimously decided to accept only local waste at its Summerhill site when it comes online in 1992-93. Lake Macquarie Council, however, has a very different idea and will do all it can to have that motion rescinded. It wants to dump 2/3 of the lake area's rubbish at the site for 16 years, beginning in 1994. According to Alderman Frank Rigby, who heads the Newcastle committee looking into the Summerhill site, Lake Macquarie Council is taking the easy way out.
They've had a problem out there as long as we've had a problem, as long as Wyong's had a problem. And both Wyong and Newcastle have looked at their problem and are well on the way to solving it. Lake Macquarie have just sat on their block doing nothing and hoping that somebody else will solve their problems for them. They will not make the hard decisions. I'm sure that Newcastle Council will take a very dim view of what was passed there on Monday night.
If Newcastle Council refuses to take waste from the neighbouring lake area, then Lake Macquarie Council has a major problem on its hands. Redhead Tip could close within 2 years, and the only other dump in the area is on the western side of the lake at Awabba. It does not have the capacity to take all Lake Macquarie's waste.
If there's no sites available, we can do nothing about it, other than to either transport it by a transfer station or try and form a relationship with Newcastle City Council.
Lake Macquarie Council appears to be in a hurry to find an alternative dump site. Redhead Tip is supposed to close in 1994, but under pressure today, engineer Reg Norris confirmed it may be a lot sooner than that.
The life of the present tip is in the order of 1993-94 completion. Maybe before that. At this time we're taking extensive levels to ascertain the total extent of the time period.
I think Lake Macquarie are just trying to get themselves off the hook.
Jodie McKay, NBN News.
These 5 final year TAFE students studying building are the best in the Hunter. John Vasilakis last night received the gold medal for being Craftsman of the Year. Today he was back on the construction site at Redhead.
I put a lot of hard work in during my trade course, and I worked hard for it, and obviously out on the job I sort of put a lot of effort into it.
His advice to other apprentices is to first finish school.
I think doing the HSC should be a prerequisite for any trade course. To me, I think it gave me the edge over the others because I'd been just that little bit extra schooling, and it paid dividends as far as I'm concerned.
In his spare time, John has designed and already started building his own house.
I'm doing just about everything that I can. The trades that I'm not skilled in, I have friends that are helping me out. Electrical and the plumbing, the friends are helping me with.
The Hunter entered 2 sides in a 12-team tournament and both emerged undefeated from yesterday's early rounds. Unfortunately for the boys in Team 2, things changed dramatically today. 2 defeats this morning saw them pitted against the traditionally strong South Coast outfit in a sudden death encounter. A hometown win would have seen both Hunter sides contesting the same semi-final, but it wasn't to be. The Illawarra boys were just too slick and ran out convincing winners 78 points to 44. The A-team players made their intentions clear from the start. After more than a decade in the competitive wilderness, they're now considered a great chance to take out the state crown, and an unbeaten run through the preliminaries has their confidence sky high. They demolished an impressive Riverina side 89-74 this afternoon, and should qualify for tomorrow's final by turning the tables on the South Coast in the semis. Bruce Mackenzie, NBN News.
The Miles twin Yamaha outboards sparked to life for the first time in nearly 2 years. They've been stripped down and rebuilt by volunteer labour at the Lemon Tree Marina Service Centre. Parts were supplied at a fraction of the $10,000 cost of repairs earlier budgeted for by the police department. The Mile was out of action just over a month ago when it could have been used to ferry rescuers to a serious boating accident on the Mile River. Valuable time was used in refuelling and borrowing another boat to reach the scene. One man later died in hospital. The government made overtures to repair the boat, but it was the volunteers who came to the rescue.
I suppose we've got a safety net in as much as there's a police boat there to cover them in times of emergency, and maybe the police, if they get budget funding to run fuel, will be able to police the area a bit better.
Police Minister Pickering naturally applauded the work volunteered by the Lemon Tree Marina Service Centre. However, he wouldn't be drawn on the issue of neglect that had led the locals to take the issue into their own hands. He put the maintenance of the boats squarely onto the police department. Assistant Commissioner Charlie Parsons said the boats were of a low priority and would remain that way. A similar boat in Foster has also been out of action since January, with little likelihood of repair. Assistant Commissioner Parsons is working on a plan to sell off many of the now ageing craft and use the revenue to maintain those remaining. In the meantime, he suggested Foster Police could borrow a surf club rubber ducky in case of an emergency. Andrew Lobb reporting for NBN News.